All right, guys. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast. We're talking Auburn football as well as SEC football. Man, I have one of my favorite uh, co-hosts on the show tonight, Kyle Sutherland, who is a part of the Tex Hogs podcast, where he talks exclusively about Arkansas sports on all levels. Not like me, where he talks about all Arkansas sports. I just talk about football. He's well rounded in this, and just before we get started, I just want to let you guys know, as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle. How you doing, Cal?
I'm doing great, man. Hopefully the weather's not going to blow us away. We're actually expected to get quite a bit here in Arkansas. So I know that hurricane coming through Laura is pretty tough on everyone down there in Louisiana, and we're going to feel some of it too. But, man, I guess I didn't correct you because we didn't talk for, I guess, since the end of last football season. But I'm actually with the Hog Talk now. Tex
Oh
Hogs.
wow.
I don't know if we've talked since
We
then,
have
but
we absolutely have not, because
yeah,
what we
yeah.
were gonna do is we were actually going to talk about Arkansas and Auburn had a really big key game coming up in basketball, and the
hmm
COVID-19 kind of
That's right.
wiped that away, and we just never got a chance to get that interview, and now we're just now catching up. So yeah, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Yeah, so it's good to be back, man. Well, I guess the last time I talked with you, I was still in San Antonio covering Arkansas. Now I'm back home, so been in the central part of the state for a few more days, and then
Okay.
heading down southwest for the I guess after 5 months, I'm moving somewhere else. So,
Oh
but
man,
it's good to
that
catch up with you
moving
again.
sucks. Oh yeah, most definitely. Always enjoy our interviews. And to get into it, let's talk about this unprecedented 2020 All SEC schedule. You're pretty well versed, especially covering Arkansas football. Who do you think are the biggest winners and losers of this situation? Because when I look at, I look at Arkansas, for example, starting out with Georgia, and then maybe a win against Mississippi State, possibly. Got to go down to Auburn, Ole Miss, and then Texas A&M, and then Tennessee. It just looks brutal for Arkansas and teams like those. So tell me, what is your take on this All SEC schedule?
Yeah, I'll start with the losers. I certainly think Arkansas is at the bottom of that list. Missouri right above them. Missouri did get the shaft getting their two West games, the crossover into the other division. They got LSU and Bama, so they started. Welcome, Elijah Drinkwitz, to the SEC. Your first game is at home against Bama, and
Oh,
also drew
what a treat!
LSU. Yeah, and that's kind of the same thing with Sam Pittman. Sam Pittman's got his former team Georgia as the first game, so they're both getting it. Both Pittman and Drinkwitz are getting their former or their formal initiation into the SEC, so that should be interesting. But even though that Mizzou has to play 5 of the top 20, so there's 7 SEC teams in the top 25. Arkansas's got 7 of them, and I guess the extra 2 that Missouri won't play. So Missouri has 5, and they don't play Auburn or A&M. And Arkansas, being in the West, plays them. Plus, they also drew Georgia and Florida. I initially, just like any Arkansas fan, was pretty upset, and I wasn't shocked. I was joking around that was going to happen, and it turned out to be true. But I think that, and I guess I can say this without getting in a whole lot of trouble since this is an Auburn podcast, but Arkansas fans, just we have to realize where we're at right now. And I've had to slap myself in the face a few times to remind myself how far our football program has fallen, but nobody respects us. And so that's one of the reasons why I think there's a bunch of different conspiracies as to why they drew that schedule. But at the same time, when you're at the bottom, you got to start beating the man to be the man. And that's one of the concepts that I think that this team has taken, and they're motivated. They're ready to go. All these players that made it to the SEC, regardless of what team it might be, whether it's Alabama or Vanderbilt or Arkansas, one of those bottom dweller teams, what do you hear from players all the time? We want to play in the SEC. We want to be on TV. We want to be at a big time program. Well, here's your chance to prove that. And the thing about it with this schedule, automatically for the winners, you'll want to say that it's LSU and Alabama. But Vernon, I'll be honest with you. It's obviously so unpredictable. I really don't know who I'm going to pick. On paper, for the West, you want to say Alabama at the top because they're going to be on a redemption season. But then at that second place spot, is it going to be Auburn? Is it Auburn's all they? You never know with them. We never know what kind of gust you're going to get, what kind of team you're going to get. Sometimes they'll be 8, 9 wins when they should have had 11 or 12, and then they'll have 11 or 12 when they should have had 8 or 9. And so are they going to overtake that second spot, or is it going to be A&M? A&M still doesn't have that top 10 win. Jimbo Fisher is in a somewhat of a good spot because I think that there is going to be some leniency this year, but he's a $7.5 million man a year for a reason. And that was to beat the LSUs, the Alabamas, the Georgias. So he's going to have to get a signature win this year. It's going to be a little bit tougher because, you don't have Clemson on the schedule, but you still got that chance to beat Alabama, especially. He's beaten LSU once. He really needs to get that win over them. So, I do think that LSU and Bama were the winners, but there's just so many teams that you don't know. Is Tennessee going to continue on the great run that they had last year? What will Kentucky be like? Mark Stoops has done a lot of underwhelming coaching there. But again, going back to the West, I think it's Alabama at the top. You don't know who you have in second place. It's either going to be it's going to be Auburn, A&M, or LSU right there at that second spot, and then Arkansas and the 2 Mississippi schools will duke it out for the bottom dweller of the SEC. I think that Arkansas is in a good spot for the most part with what we have. I think this staff believes, or this team believes in the staff again. Hadn't seen that in a while, but it's going to take at least another recruiting class or two for Arkansas to really be competitive in the SEC. I'm thinking they win maybe one game against either of the Mississippi schools this year.
And I was kind of scanning through some things Arkansas-wise, and I think about them proximity-wise and geographically. They're kind of in a rough spot when you talk about recruiting. They're recruiting against the Big 12 because they're right there. They're actually being a former team in the Southwestern Conference, which is now the Big 12. They're recruiting out there. They're trying to compete to have the personnel to face SEC West schools on a week in and week out basis. The last time I remember Arkansas actually posing a legitimate threat, this was actually the last Auburn game I went to, was in 2010 when Arkansas faced Cam Newton. And I actually thought Arkansas should have won that game. They had a lot of trial and error there at the end. Where does Arkansas stand, and how are they going to be able to compete long term with all the coaching changes? And in watching Auburn and Arkansas last year, the team really wasn't that bad. It just seemed like there was something missing as far as, player engagement. Seems like you had half and half on whether the guys even wanted to be there or not. But schematically, they had Auburn out of position in a lot of ways offensively in that game. So what is your take on where Arkansas and teams like Arkansas, Vanderbilt, and all of those quote-unquote bottom dwellers, where do they go here in the future when it comes to recruiting? How do they compete recruiting-wise?
Well, with Vanderbilt, I think they're going to, just like they had under James Franklin, they had some pretty successful years, especially for their standards. And it's not, Derek Mason, I don't think, is a bad coach. I think that he's just been dealt a hard hand, and it's just tough to win there. James Franklin was able to do it, but not many coaches, regardless of how good you are, just can't. That's just how, and I think Mark Stoops has done, and I say you can't, people hate that word. We always thought that you wouldn't be able to win at Kentucky, and Mark Stoops has done a really, like I said just a second ago, he's done a great job recruiting, especially the state of Ohio, him being from Ohio bordering Kentucky. There's a lot of talent there, and he's done a great job doing that. And so Kentucky is at that point where Arkansas used to be, like in the Houston Nutt days. You might have that 10, 11 win season every so often, but you at least are going to get 7 to 8 wins. And man, Arkansas didn't know what they had at that time. I know that I've definitely choked on some of the words that I said at the end of the Houston Nutt tenure, but Kentucky knows that they're at least going to get to that 7, 8 wins at least every single year. As far as Arkansas goes, you said that they used to be in the Southwest Conference back in the day, and they were the only team that wasn't in Texas that was in that conference. And they did a good job. Frank Boyles at that time did a great job at recruiting the state of Texas. And that's one thing that people don't understand is that state's going to produce a ton of football talent, has produced more football talent than I believe any other state in the country's history. But the 3 stars there in a lot of other states would be, especially in Arkansas or even Mississippi, like some of the smaller states in the SEC or just anywhere in the country, would be a 4-star in a smaller state. And so I think that's why Arkansas has always gone after Texas, because they're right there. They're pretty close. We have a really high amount of graduates out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So it's always, of course, with Jerry Jones's connections and all that. But really more than anything, this staff, and actually even when Chad Morris was on board, he obviously recruited Texas really hard. But Sam Pittman's really put an emphasis on Oklahoma. I know that OU is going to get just about anybody that they want to in the country, whether it's in Oklahoma, no matter what state it's in. But Oklahoma State has been getting those ranked players maybe from 5 to 10 to 15 in Oklahoma, like the state that particular season or particular recruiting class. And Arkansas stolen a lot of those for 2021. I believe we have 5 or 6 committed from the state of Oklahoma for 2021. So I can imagine that Mike Gundy's pretty upset about that. But Sam Pittman just is using his geographic reach, all those connections that he has all over the country to get, whether it be offensive linemen or whoever. And so really, I know that's rambling on to answer your question, but basically, I don't know that we'll ever be back to what we had under the Petrino days, or at least not anytime in the near future. I'm just really not sure. That remains to be seen. But I do think with the fact that we've got, under Brett Bielema, we got 5 players from Texas in 5 total seasons. That just isn't going to cut it. You have to recruit the state, and in order to win, Houston Nutt did it. Bobby Petrino did it some, but he got lucky and got a bunch of players that happened to come through the state of Arkansas at the time. So overall, the fact that we've gotten into Texas and really into Oklahoma has been a big thing.
Yeah, you make mention of the geographical levels of recruiting at Arkansas with Texas and Oklahoma. It makes me think about Auburn as well, because Auburn really doesn't recruit well in the state of Alabama, and they're starting to make strides in recruiting in the state of Alabama. But they have done a good job of taking their show on the road recruiting wise. I mean, really making some noise in Texas and in Mississippi and in Florida, and especially in that Gwinnett County area in Georgia. And when you're at what people perceive to be a recruiting disadvantage, you have to get a little bit more creative, and you have to start looking at, the fact that, because you even mentioned not all 4 stars and 3 stars are created equal. You know what I'm saying? Like a 3-star in Texas could be a 5-star in Alabama, for example.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. So as we tie this thing together, we talk about, this unprecedented season that we're embarking upon. The players obviously wanting to play. Teams are going to abbreviated capacities. What do you think will happen with teams starting out at a 25% capacity? Do you think it will get to a point where, the safety will start to, get in line from a public perception standpoint, and we possibly have at least 60 to 70% capacity by the end of the season?
I've said really since June that I think that there will be a season, and it'll be just like it is right now. I said that it would be pretty much just conference only, and I thought that we might finish it, but I'm not so. I hope that I'm wrong, but I'm just not so sure that we do finish, because no matter what, you're going, even if they operate at 20% capacity, whatever, 25, 30, you're going to have cases. That's just the matter of it. I mean, that's just, unfortunately, no way to completely prevent that, even if you do follow the guidelines. But, man, I'll tell you, I would be really shocked if we make it halfway through, just because the way that I've seen things. I don't really see how I'm not saying it's not possible. I know that Mark Emmert had said that it is, and other people have said that it is, but I don't see how it's completely feasible for a college bubble. NBA athletes are a little bit different than college athletes in the terms of
plus there are less players, and you only
exactly
have to deal with 10 players versus 100.
Right. And if there's any league, I can't commend them enough. If any league has done this the right way, it has been the NBA with what they have going in Orlando. But it's really tough to tell 18 to 22-year-old. I put myself in that spot at 18 to 22 years old, and I wasn't even an athlete in college. And to think about telling someone that age that is a Division I athlete that all you can do is just sit in your room. Now, I understand that the players would probably be, most of them would probably be mature enough to understand, look, if we want to continue our season, we need to follow these guidelines. But you're always going to have some of those, and I try to refrain from using the word knucklehead, because again, I was
just thinking about that same term, because I was a knucklehead in college,
and I think about myself, and so I'm like, well, I'm calling myself that, which I was one, at that age. Hopefully, I'm not anymore, but yeah, I'll tell you, man, it's really it's just it sucks. It flat out sucks with what's happened with the Big Ten and the Pac-12. I do understand the safety precautions and everything, but just all the way around, it just is it's so unpredictable and frankly not too fun. But at least we know we're going to get a couple of games in.
Exactly. And Kyle, I really appreciate you coming on and, being a sports analyst for Auburn myself and having to continue to develop content even within the midst of the uncertainty. I definitely respect all that you're doing out there with what you do as well. Arkansas, a very documented, respectable program, hopefully on the rise here in the near future. And I always appreciate you stopping by, and best wishes to the Hogs until they face Auburn. So
October 10th.
October 10th. And I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I do want to have another interview with you probably within the first couple of weeks of the football season. Do you have any more closing words, Kyle? I always love having you on the show.
Well, I appreciate it as always, my man. And again, good to talk to you. I know it has been a while since I know we talk every once in a while on social media, but it's been good to connect with you again and talk some sports, and willing to do it anytime, man.
Oh, yeah, man. All right. For the Auburn fans out there and also the Arkansas fans and the rest of the SEC, this is Kennard Vernon Stewart. I had Kyle Sutherland on the show tonight. He is very well versed in the Arkansas football. So go ahead and where can we find you, Kyle? That's the thing I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, so on Twitter, I'm at Sutherland54 WPS, like Wupig Sui, and that's Sutherland Sutherland. And then you can find the Hog Talk, which is, again, I used to be a part of Tex Hogs. That was what my previous podcast was, but now I'm with the Hog Talk, and that's HAWG, and you can find us on Facebook, Arkansas Hog Talk, Twitter at The Hog Talk, and then also Instagram, The Hog Talk. So we're pretty active on all those forums.
That's pretty cool. So it's like hog as in dog.
Yeah, like DAWG. Yeah.
Yes, sir, man. Always love having you on the show, man. And for the fans out there, once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast, talking Auburn football. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle. Appreciate it, Kyle.
All right, man. No problem. Anytime.